Welcome back to SideBars with Tamice and Leah. This is episode 2 of SideBars, responding to episode 2 of Black Modern Mystic. And today we're talking about womanism and womanist theology as a resurrection technology, or something that helps us live in spite of death-dealing logics.
Mm.
So one of the things that was really cool was how Dr. Gary Green and Dr. Amy Victoria Atkins Jones broke down something called the waves of womanism. And I really would love to hear you talk, friend. This is where you got your degree in. I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about something we didn't get into much in the episode, which is kind of a fourth wave of
Uh,
womanism. So what's going on with womanism in these waves, and like where is it at right now?
I love that question. I want to say a bit about the book "All the Black Girls Are Activists" is by Ebony Janice. Gor-
Hey.
it's a gorgeous cover, and to paraphrase her wording, what she's saying is that this fourth wave takes all the tools that we've gotten in the first three. Right, we have the scholarship, the interrogation, we have the troubling of heteronormativity. And now we can take all of that and look at ourselves and even be introspective. We can talk now about rest and play and pleasure and all those things, and that also is a form of activism. And so I love where we are and the freedom that we have and, just this pursuit of self and community. So it's a nice spot to be in right now.
Yeah, I feel that because I keep something about this. So I follow Ebony Janice on Instagram and love what she's putting out, and I keep thinking about rest. And I know
Yeah.
that Trisha Hersey wrote a book about rest is resistance. You've got people like Shaniqua Walker Barnes thinking about, in my own personal experience, you hear of all of these books on rest, and it's still very hard to enter into. Like, it's still a very hard, um, thing to put on, and it makes me think of actually this conversation that I had with my niece this past weekend. She's Black, and that's important because, she and I were talking about how we're both done with school. I finished my doctorate, she finished her nursing school semester, and yay, yeah, and she was saying, "I can't sit still. I got a little bitty break and I'm having a hard time." She's got a little boy. She's like, "I cannot sit still. I cannot rest." And so we're talking back and forth and we're sharing stuff. And you know what I asked? I said, "Were you raised by Black parents who went to school, um, and you grew up middle class?" And she was like,
Mm.
"Yeah." And I was like, "I'm wondering about this idea of epigenetics of like." 'Cause I have always felt that the grind, that part of the way that I was showing up in the world was in homage to my ancestors, that, like, me going real hard and, like, being Black excellence and, like, getting the grades and, like, doing this stuff was also driven by this desire to, like, be pleasing, to be a good steward of a legacy, you know? And now I'm realizing after I'm doing therapy, like, so kind of enacting some of this fourth wave stuff, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. But, like,
Mm.
going to therapy and realizing, like, actually me resting is like, I believe in quantum and all that, right? So, like, me
Yeah.
resting is having backward effect. I'm, like, healing backwards. That, like, I'll share it with you. I had this encounter during one of my meditations of, like, my ancestors, in a sharecropper shack. And, um, the ancestor or the part was always trying to tell me to be small. Like, don't take up too much space because if you overstep, if you cross the boundary, they'll take everything. So I always kind of grew up with this, like, um, kind of inkling to just be small and not to take up much space because I didn't want to lose the little bit of good stuff I had. But what I realized in this meditation was, like, as I was taking up space, it was expanding. I hate to be like Jabez, child,
No,
but, like, you know what I
hard.
mean? Enlarging her territory backwards, like, me taking up space actually is healing my line backwards. Me taking the rest and saying no is actually doing what they could not do. And I know that Starlet got to some of this in the first episode, but it's really powerful how, I don't know, this fourth wave, as you're talking about, is really calling us to take this seriously, that actually the homage is in your refusal You
Yeah.
know? I don't know, man. Anyway, that's a little bit of my experience with I guess I was kind of living into fourth wave before I knew what it was. So I called on you, doc, to teach us about it a little bit more.
Yes, but I have a similar experience about living into it before I knew what it was, and I have heard
Mm,
things said about how we can heal our ancestors and how they experience things through us, and I believe that's true. I hope that it's true, because it took so much work, so many years of work to get to this rest in
mm,
this that Ebony Janice is talking about, and I'll tell you, um, why it resonates so much with me because I actually went to, well, I've been to seminary a few times, but the first time I got to Bright Divinity School when I was fresh out of undergrad, so 20 whatever, hadn't read anything, hadn't been anywhere, everything is so new and so fresh, and so I'm hearing about womanism, and at this point, it's biblical scholarship, it's interrogation, it's a lot of critique, which is so necessary,
mhm,
but hard work, and it wasn't,
mhm,
landing for me internally because I didn't know the world yet. I didn't know patriarchy in the ways that
mhm,
they're speaking in scripture, etcetera, etcetera. And so the second time I came around to woman, it started with Alice Walker and this womanist girl, right? Her
mhm,
poem, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. And there was something there for me because I had been called womanish. I mean, black girls were called womanish in Texas. And um being called womanish is you being in grown folks' business. It's asking grown up questions and sometimes even moving your body like a grown woman.
mhm,
But all those things are it's thinking, it's inquiry, it's sexuality, sensuality, and spirituality, all of that. Which again, that scholarship is so important, but the embodiment I wasn't connected to yet. And so that helps me see. I say
mm,
all that to say, once I was able to connect to the girlhood part of it, the
mm,
natural part of it, the just inherited with me to connect to this lens of seeing the world, right? And
mm,
so but it took all of those ways and all of those decades of work and seeing scripture, et cetera, to land in back into ourselves. It's a returning, right? That's how I feel
yeah.
about wave womanism, and so it feels so good to be here after having studied to now look at my life and see how even when I'm not reading, even when I'm not writing or preaching, I'm still womanist.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mm, mm, mm.
I
That's really, really good. I think there's so much to be said for how fourth wave is kind of it I don't know, there's something that I love about I mean, there's all kinds of conversations around womanism and et cetera, but, like, what I love about it is a tethering. It's a tethering to a process. I'm like, "Yo, like, I'm keeping Katie Geneva Cannon, like, there would be no me." Like, there would be no and I think that I was talking to my friend Alex, about this recently about, you know, for some of us, we not letting go of Jesus, and that's okay. And like, you know, I think that's okay. There's a specific niche of people that like want to be able to have prayer and plant medicine and Jesus and Reiki
yes.
and vibrators. Like, all of it, and that all of it is I keep thinking I know we haven't talked about her, but I keep thinking about Audre Lorde and,
Mm,
like, the erotic, because
vers
I can't think about the erotic without thinking about Jesus,
yes.
basically, in terms of how she thinks about the erotic, and I can't think about the incarnation of Jesus now without thinking about the uses of the erotic and the uses of anger. And so I keep thinking about the ways that womanism really did bore like, it it dug ground that so many of us are sort of, flourishing out of, that it was really important for me, to say, "No, womanism is a technology of resurrection for us in
Yes.
in very specific and particular ways." And like you said in the first episode, that there is something queer going on if you can see it. And obviously Alice Walker talks about it, women who love women. And we didn't hit on that. Monica Coleman kind of brings attention to that. But like, yeah, I'm appreciative of these conversations of like, how do we, and Dr. Green in the episode talks about the widening as opposed to kind of a moving forward. Like, what are your thoughts on how he was explaining that?
I love him, first of all. He is a
Yeah. Shout
but
out.
he explained it so beautifully in his words and what Ebony Denise has done. It's making me think of how the movement of womanism has almost kind of traced the definition, the path of the definition. So it begins in this kind of questioning, asking
Mm,
more than what is considered good for one. But then the fourth part, or the third and the fourth part, is love spirit, loves dance, loves the moon. It didn't
mhm.
start, but we've taken this journey and now we are here. And that is a big part of the widening that he's talking about. Yeah.
Love spirit, love dance,
Loves
loves the
the
moon.
saying it out of order, I'm sure, but all of that though, this kind of
Mm,
return to inner knowing and connection to earth and divinity and yeah. But you have to start with questions to get there.
that's true. Right,
Yeah.
like, you have to begin to question the inherited framework yonder. You
Yeah.
you have to, and I think there was I'm like, being non-binary and also womanist is a very interesting experience because it's like, I don't know if I could have fully embraced one without the other. And I remember where I was at a Pride in the Pews conference. Shout out to Don and all the folks at Pride in the Pews. And on a panel, and Benwell was there, and they were like, I mean, it was incredible. It was black trans clergy on this panel, and I went up and I asked them about the color purple and about some of this temptation to hide. I had just like that ancestor practice that happened after this moment, which now I'm putting it together. But I went up and I asked this question about like, how are y'all sourcing safety? I feel like, on the one hand, Alice Walker writes about the walking past a flower that is purple. And like it pisses God off to walk past the purple flower and not notice it. And I felt like that was something that sort of my grandmother was instilling in me from a young age, that I was a purple flower.
Oh,
And, um, and that was not something that I really experienced in life. So when I got to this moment of like, I don't even care, like I again, like I must be free and this is me and come what may. There was a level of just like, I'm about to face death. Just, like fall back into it because I cannot lie about who I am and who I know God to be. And like when I got to this place, they were kind of like, no, the sourcing of the safety is actually in the showing up.
mm.
And it was Candace. Candace actually really, she heard the question. She heard what I was asking. Then she was like, I think that you have to learn that the safety is in the not hiding. That's the real safety. It changed my whole game because we're in this thing and I'm looking left and I'm looking right, and it was looking right, and I was seeing all of these black queer people singing "You Are the Living Word"
Oh my gosh.
and then
Influ
vaping in the parking lot.
yeah. 'Cause why not?
You know, because why not? But,
Mm.
like, that level of integration of all the parts of the self, that there's nothing hidden, there is nothing that needs to be hidden. It was so powerful for me, and it was probably how this whole thing birthed, really. It was it felt like that movie, that show Captain Planet, where all the planets combined?
Yes. It's been a
That's what
while.
it felt like. That's
Mm.
what it felt like. It just felt like integration.
Integration.
You know
Integration.
what I mean? This is my lineage. You know what I'm saying?
Blessings to Candace Bimbo for saying that and
Yeah,
naming
sure.
all
Yeah.
that she is and does, but, um and also thank you for just naming that from a non-binary perspective because
Mhm.
And you talk about this kind of journey, the her definition or the starting point is at a womanist is a black woman and then or a black girl even.
Mhm,
But that shows the consciousness has expanded in the sense of not just what we do, but our identity, right? Uh,
mhm,
know that gender fluidity is ancient, but again,
mm,
some of us, years of work to land back at this vast and deep and expansive identity, and I'm so glad that it has happened and is happening this way, and I can't wait to see the future, you
right.
know? Yeah.
What do you think the future looks like?
Oh, that's such a good question. Man, let me think about that for a second. What do I think? Are you asking about the future of womanism?
Yeah, if womanism has its way over the next 5 to 10 years, what
Hmm.
happens in the world?
Um, I'll say this. I think one of the things that will happen is that a lot of the people who are talking about expansion and liberation will feel permitted to have it themselves. That's what I think will happen
Oh, shit.
because that is a process, right?
Yeah.
I'm a lot of things in principle,
Mhm.
but in spirit, even I have work to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I hear that, man. I feel like yeah, I feel that. I feel like that's what I'm being invited into in this season,
yeah.
in an odd way. I don't know about you, but, like, I'm doing the whole winter solstice practice and, like, um, I'm feeling invited into letting go
Mhm.
of a self, that has served me and protected me and gotten me through a mighty long way. But it's no longer necessary. And there's some parts of that that I feel like come from my embrace of the womanist process and like feeling my way through. And I'm terrified, I'm excited, but I just feel like there's a part of the process, the womanist process that does leave you to these like wilderness experiences of like,
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know what's about to be up under here. And I'm saying yes anyway, because I can name God. Michelle Higgins taught me that we can give God a name. And I feel like I don't know if it's more stabilizing to have the one name that doesn't wear out or to have a whole bunch of names for every place and every space that you go to. I prefer to have a plethora, I think, an encyclopedia of names. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
I
And I
think
think
it's
that that's go ahead.
I think it's both and.
Uh,
I think you
yes.
can have, these sort of universal words that communities can gather under, and
Mm,
then everybody in the hush harbor or the pew have their own 500 names for that spirit or because
yeah,
language fails us anyway.
that part. Yeah.
The more we have, the more we can attempt to know and feel
Mm,
and I don't think we should put any limitations on how and how many times we name God.
mm. What's the name for God that you got going on right now?
Well, that's a beautiful question. It's not a new name, but it's what I'm calling back regulator. I am determined to regulate my nervous system.
Mm,
And when I think about, God as mind regulator,
mhm,
that's so old school, but it's so
mhm,
to me now.
mm,
I want such clarity and such peace in my mind. And then um, for that to lead the way that I live my life, you
yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm messing with the God who goes slow right now.
Different.
Real, like Real talk. It's hard for me. I'm Capricorn and a 3. It's hard, but I'm like, "Oh, oh, I get it." Like, slow. And, like, on one of our episodes, you and I, we talked about trees, and, like, I remember the first time talking to a tree, and I remember writing this poem in my head. It's like, "Do you know how still you have to be to hear from a tree?" You know?
Bush.
That's still, you know?
Oh
And I'm
goodness.
like, "Oh my goodness, I'm starting to love that space, friend. I really am." And I hear you on maybe perhaps that's the 4th wave is bringing us home to self and to rest.
Think it is. I do, I really do.
Yeah, Ashe. Yeah, I hear that. Man, we thank everybody for being with us on our episode 2 of our, sidebars, where we're continuing to just think through the episodes that are coming out. These are not polished and super duper produced. This is just 2 homies kicking it and talking about the themes that are being covered in the episodes, how they're playing out in our life, how they're provoking us and challenging us, and how we wanna try to practice them in real time.